So welcome to the Extra Lucky podcast. I'm Taryn, and today I'm joined by the team at Foregenomics. Foregenomics has designed a comprehensive test to give parents access to preventative healthcare for their children. And we're going to spend the next little bit talking about it, so I'm not going to dive in more than that, but I would love to introduce you to the team. We have the CEO and founder, Matthew Pello. We have the VP of Business Operations, Jason Mulhern. And we have a community member from ELM who you will be very familiar with, who is also part of the team at Foregenomics, Jess Fabre. So welcome, everybody. I would like to give everybody a chance to just introduce themselves quickly before we dive in. So Matt, maybe we want to start with you.
Yeah, happy to start. Thanks so much for having us here today to Taryn, the ELM team. I'm Matt Pello, founder and CEO of Foregenomics. I've spent the last 15 years in life sciences, the last 10 years in genomics and genetics research. And I'm excited to be here today to talk more about what we've built, as I think we can really help people and improve the lives of children.
So Jason?
Yeah, hi, I'm Jason Mulhern. I joined Foregenomics about a year ago and, spent the last 23 years or so working at companies, building and growing capability and product strategy, operations, marketing, sales. And I live in San Diego and have had the opportunity to learn about genetics and attend some conferences and, see the amazing solutions that are available for family health and just for human health in general. And, found Foregenomics and just found a way to get involved.
Awesome. And Jess?
Hi, I'm Jessica Fabre. I'm a parent ambassador with Foregenomics. I'm a contributing author to Dear Mama, Stories of an Extra Lucky Life. And I also host a webpage called Navigating Rare to help support parents in the rare community and also provide physician education about rare diseases. And I'm the mom to Sophie, who has a rare genetic disorder that we didn't find out until later in her life.
Yeah, so that's part of what we're going to dive into today. So we're not going to go into Sophie's full story because 2 episodes ago, Jess was on with us, and you can go and listen to an amazing story of a mom who fought for a diagnosis for her daughter. But Jess joined the Foregenomics team because she was inspired by something that would have really helped her many, many, many years ago when, her daughter, or well before really her daughter had ever presented symptoms. So if you want to just kind of talk about that very quickly, Jess,
Sure.
And then, I would encourage everyone to go back to that episode and listen.
Yep, very quickly. My daughter was born with no symptoms at all of a genetic disorder. She rarely even had an ear infection or cold. It wasn't until she was 5 years old and had pneumonia, walking pneumonia, something you could pick up at daycare, that we realized something was very wrong when we received abnormal blood work. And that's what began 2 years of a diagnostic odyssey of many tests and procedures and all kinds of things until we got to our diagnosis of a genetic disease. But looking back, had I had something like this test from Foregenomics and had I had this knowledge up front, we could have avoided all of that. So I could have tested my newborn, I could have screened her, found out well ahead of time before any symptoms appeared that this might be something we need to pay attention to in the future. But I didn't have that at the time.
Yeah, and we're going to talk later in the episode about what that would have meant to you. But I'd love to switch to Matt. Matt, if you could just share with us where, it's not every day that people decide to start a company to change the landscape of, genetic diagnosis. So can you talk to us a little bit about your why, your mission and why you wanted to bridge this gap?
Absolutely. So I'll talk a little bit about my background, and that's a nice bridge into why we started and launched our genetic health screen. I worked at a company called the New York Genome Center for about 10 years, and it was a genomics research institution. And what we did there was we would partner with researchers throughout the world that were interested in understanding, why some people get sick and some people don't based on their genetics. And so through that work, we were able to take, large cohorts of individuals with diseases and find genetic biomarkers that would say these people are more predisposed than this group of people. And from there, then pharma picks up on that research. You start to get therapies. You start to get a whole, downstream application that's based off of that understanding of our genetics. And so that research led into us launching a clinical lab where we had the first whole genome sequencing test. And while we were launching that, we kept seeing the number of genes that we were reporting on expanding. And that test was really focused on adults. We partnered with some world-class hospitals to offer it as part of their executive physical program. And it just kept gnawing at me that this technology could be best applied for children. Your DNA does not change throughout your life. And so sequencing early, reanalyzing often was really the focus of Fore in launching our genetic health our genetic health screen. And so I've got the technology background, the operations background, was able to, with the rest of the team who's not here, was able to design what we think is the most comprehensive genetic test for children, and then brought on people like Jason to really help us. How do we go and tell the world that this technology exists and is available for new parents?
So talk to us a little bit about that, because I love entrepreneurs. I love people who, are solving problems. So I know it's not as simple as you have this technology and you get it out. Like, walk us through that process a little bit of how long has this been? What have you had? What barriers have you had to kind of break through? And Jason, maybe you can jump in also from the business side of like, where are you planning on heading as you bring it more to market?
Yep.
Absolutely. I'll start. It takes a lot longer than you expect to bring a product like this to market. And in our case, we're creating a completely new market. So this isn't, we're not launching a new golf ball brand where there's incumbents and we go and compare our technology against others that are there and use that for our marketing. We're actually trying to create a new category of technology. So that's been a challenge. And then the other challenge has been, we don't want to stop short of just taking a DNA sample, sequencing it, and providing reports back to parents. There's a lot more that can be done. You want to make this information as actionable as possible. So how do you involve genetic counselors? How do you provide resources for their pediatricians? So now they've got care planning. That's part of the deliverable. Then also, how do you connect parents with resources like ELM so that they're not navigating this alone? And that's where we were connected with Jessica. And I don't even remember it now how we were connected. I think it was on Twitter, and we just had a conversation, and the rest is history. But I found a lot of people that are supportive of what we're building and want to be helpful.
Yeah, I would, stuff that I would add to that is, in getting out and telling our story through like a business function and communications and marketing, we need to educate. We've talked about that in the past with the LM and ourselves, that knowledge is power. And we also need to find who our champions of change are. So we've got a full community of parents that don't know that these things are available to them, just like Jessica mentioned. And so we need to reach out to them through marketing, take this topic that could seem kind of scary because it's not, a dinner conversation typically, and just start educating people on it, start giving them little bits of information, get them to come to our site. We need to make partners of physicians because they're very trusted folks for families, and help people understand the power that this solution can create, and then create those champions for us. We've got folks like Jessica that are willing to share their lives and share their story. We need physicians that are willing to start up those conversations with parents where, hey, this is something a little bit new, but I'm on your side. I want to talk you through it. And so we're doing that with media. We're doing that with relationships and opportunities to speak to organizations like ELM and just trying to propagate the word and get it out there.
I mean, I really feel like that's what drew us to you guys, and also what sets you guys apart, because and you guys are not a prenatal you're not a prenatal diagnosis or prenatal test at all. So what I'm sharing is not completely related, but with the Down syndrome diagnosis that I got for my daughter, it's a very easy, we always say it's easy to count chromosomes. It's, one of the most common prenatal tests that comes up. But as common as it is and how everybody knows to do it, that next step is very often missing. And there's a lot of great genetic counselors that are doing the good work and getting people connected with resources. But in my case, for example, got the diagnosis and it was like, do you know what you want to do? And there was no information. I had to seek out everything myself. They did send like it was probably from the mid 90s, an old photocopied article about Down syndrome that was about as outdated as it gets. And I had to seek everything out myself. So when you think about something that's as common as the Down syndrome diagnosis, and that there's not this sort of package diagnosis where you've got that support behind you, you've got the resources, you've got the information, you get a care plan. I mean, that's really what drew us to your organization and the work that you're doing. It's not just about handing, the diagnosis, and it's about what are the next steps and how can you see that family through that. So I just really had to take a moment and say that and applaud you guys for that work alone.
That was one of the reasons I was so drawn to Matt when I spoke to him and read about this, is because they're not just a genetic testing company. They are really trying to dive into a parent's point of view. They're addressing parents' needs both emotionally and with knowledge and results. So they do have that genetic counseling, and they are coming up with ways to work with your providers and have a bit of a plan. And I haven't seen any founders or teams on the market in this arena with this type of testing who are so closely trying to work with a family as a whole and the parent, not just handing over a result and health information, which is a lot of what you get in the medical world. They're taking it a step further. They're passionate about what they do, and they really care. And that shows in the way they're doing their marketing. I'm privy to a lot of the research they do when they're trying to come up with ads, and they really listen to what parents are thinking and what parents have to say. And they're trying to come up with the best plan for parents should you receive a diagnosis, or if you don't, you can get that retesting and that assurance. So that's what really, really drew me to this company, is that they're doing something that's not being done anywhere by adding that to their product and their company.
Yeah. And Jess, let's talk a little bit more about your experience, because it's not one that's unfamiliar with our community. We have a huge population of rare parents in our community, and time again, the story is the same, that, something clicked for them, that something was going on with their child. And it was, in some cases, years, like your case, and yours, you weren't the only one who it took years to get that diagnosis. But, what does that mean to you? Because what we haven't even touched on is the fact that a lot of our families have spent a ton of money getting to their diagnosis. So the fact that before you even had that inkling that something was going on, you could have had this accessible product, saving the time, the money, and not just those two tangible things, but the stress that it would have saved you.
There's a lot of stress that comes with having an issue with your child. And I just keep going back to, oh my gosh, if we had just screened my son when they were born, like if this was part of a regular screening, now that you have that available, it would have saved me my job at the time, all the missed work. It would have saved me from leaving my son by himself. It would have saved my family from the incredible amount of stress we went through, chasing the unknown, not knowing what was going to happen or what was wrong. The money we spent traveling from hospital to hospital, the different diagnostics my daughter had to go through. And the thing is, for most people, I mean, my daughter's disease is very rare. So I don't want people to think if you screen your child, you're trying to find something rare. I think in most cases, for most children, I don't know what the percentages are, but you're not going to get a limb-girdle muscular dystrophy diagnosis. You may find out what medications might work best for your child in the future. I mean, you're gaining a whole world of knowledge, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be something rare or genetic that needs attention. But should it need attention, you have that information. You are saving yourself a world of stress. You are ahead of the game. You could start at the point of knowing, okay, my child's predisposed to these things, and now I'm seeing some symptoms. We need to get on this, and our pediatrician maybe will follow your child as they're growing to look out for signs and symptoms of active disease. Just because you're predisposed to a disease does not mean you're actually going to have that disease and manifest that as a full-blown pathogenic disease. But having that knowledge ahead of time gives you that power to have a little control over this situation and really be proactive in your child's health. And that is a gift. And if you can give that to your family and your child, it's not just a genetic test. You're giving yourself a gift of peace and of knowledge and of more time with your family. So I can't say enough good things about this. It's not something you have to be afraid of to do. It's knowledge.
Yeah, so that's a good segue. And Matt, maybe you can talk about this a little bit. What are some of the myths and misconceptions about genetic testing in general for children? You know, what is Foregenomics and what is it not? You know, dive into some of that.
Yeah, it's a perfect question and nice segue. And before I forget about this point, wanted to follow up on Jessica's point. So across all diseases that we currently screen for, our incidence rate's about 10%. That's kind of a broad number to use. About 30 million people in the U.S. live with a condition that we screen for. So it's not, it's not 50%, it's not 75%. It's a relatively low number, but for those 10%, an earlier diagnosis would be life-changing for not only the child but for the family. So one of the things that we're working hard on is people go through carrier screening. So when they're in the pregnancy planning stages, there's obviously NIPT testing. There's some pre-implantation testing that's becoming more popular with IVF. Then post-birth, there are newborn screening programs that are state-run. Depending on the state that you're in, they might test for a few dozen conditions, and those are one-time tests. Then there is nothing for the child until symptoms present, and usually a genetic test. It's reimbursed by insurance at that point. It's physician ordered, but it's not usually a first-line test. It's sometimes second, third, fourth line. And that's what's creating these diagnostic odysseys, because it does take time to schedule follow-up appointments with physicians, get the results from those, primary tests before they actually will order the genetic test. So what FOR is we bridge the gap between newborn screening and a diagnostic test. We're a screening test that you could, take in the earliest weeks of life. We say 4 before 4, but there's no reason you couldn't do it for a 6, 7, 8-year-old. All conditions we screen for are pediatric onset, so likely to have symptoms before the age of 20. Just because you're predisposed does not mean that you will ever get symptoms. Some people are predisposed and never get sick. Those are interesting cases because then there's probably protective genes somewhere that are limiting the disease, and then there might be interesting discovery there. But it's a screening test, and so it bridges that gap between what newborn screening, a state-run program, is able to offer and what a diagnostic test would look for post-symptomatic. And so providing that information early in life just gives families, more knowledge and more options, to make healthcare more proactive.
Yeah, and I wonder, and this is just a side note, I wonder if someone shows predisposed, does that just mean essentially that they could be a carrier for something and never actually present for it?
We don't report on carrier status. I would say you're more likely than not. It's probably in the 90% likelihood that you will get sick at some point in your life if we report that you are predisposed to the genetic disorder. But being sick it's a spectrum. There's things that you can do, whether it's diet, whether it's lifestyle, whether it's proactively taking medication, where you might avoid the onset of symptoms indefinitely. And especially with some of the gene therapies that have come out for type 1 diabetes, for example, they've shown clinical trials, the clinical trials are 4 or 5 years at this point, but symptoms have not presented in the clinical trial population.
Okay,
And
great.
those points that Matt just made are an excellent bookend to what Jessica was talking about, not just gaining time back, with family, but she expressed as soon as she got her daughter's diagnosis, she could start, therapies or, PT or, if there were a dietary change. And so it's getting parents a head start on everything that's preventative as well as, care.
Well, we always say knowledge is power. And the hardest
Yeah.
part for people in our community who have sat for, a long time waiting for a diagnosis is just that waiting, because you can't put one foot in front of the other because you don't know what you're approaching.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely knowledge is power in that respect. Okay, so for everyone who's listening, who's like, oh, this sounds great. Walk us through the process. If your baby is, your child, like you said, is a couple years old, or your baby's a few months old, and you've heard about this amazing company and you want to use it, what are the steps there? I don't know who wants to take that.
Matt, do you want to?
Jason, yep, absolutely. So the step we've part of our goal, and Jessica touched on this, is to make this easy for parents. And so our test has all the compliance as if your doctor ordered it, but you're able to initiate it yourself as a parent on our website, foregenomics.com. Right now, foresight360.com. They both go to the same site. And what you would do is you register for our test. The test is approved by our doctors. Since it's a predisposition genetic test, there's no reason a child would not be approved for it. So our doctors will actually place the order for the test. We'll send you an easy at-home saliva collection kit. It's just it's no blood, no heel prick, nothing like that. It's saliva. It goes to our lab. We sequence 100% of the child's DNA. We screen for a few hundred conditions. Our gene list is constantly expanding. We provide pre-test genetic counseling, post-test genetic counseling, collect some family history. You get access to your clinical report. You get access to your genetic counseling notes. And then through our app, you're able to share that information with your physician, with any specialist, anyone else that you want, subject to sign the appropriate HIPAA releases. Our product doesn't stop there, and this is what I really wanted to build, and what differentiates us is each year, so there's about $6 billion of research spent every year to try to continue to understand why some people get sick and some people don't based on their genetics. The genetics community believes that every disease has a genetic component. So if you start there and work backwards, you're constantly expanding that the amount of information that you have. And so we'll go back and reanalyze the child's whole genome every year and expand that gene list. So this year it might be 350 conditions. Next year it might be 400. The year after that it might be 500. But you're constantly, you know what science knows until your child turns 18.
Right. So, like we briefly touched on earlier, it's been exciting for us to be involved and meet with your company several times and just, hear how passionate everybody is about not just bringing this company to life, but just carrying families through the process. We love that you're just not handing that clinical information and walking away. It's a big mission of ours. It's why we put together the book, Dear Mama, was to maybe be part of like clinical information and be able to provide that support. But was that something that when you first conceptualized the company, that you saw, or was it something that the more time that you spent in the community, it became more and more of a passion to have the whole package there?
I think it's both. It was you had this gap between what technology enables us to do and what's available in the clinic, and so our goal is to bridge that gap. I don't think that it's a question of if, it's more of a question of when. But every child at some point in our lifetime will have their DNA sequence at birth. There's so much utility for it throughout life, whether it's medication dosage or predisposition to disease. And so our goal is to make that future, a reality today and bring this technology, make it available for parents. And part of that is you have to improve the clinical utility. how do you not just deliver a report and say our job's done, but how do you give the parent tools, their physician tools, so that they can then implement, the outcome of that report.
What has been the response so far from physicians and from, the more clinical side that you've experienced?
It's been really positive. We started with, and we still are, activating clinics. We call it activating. It's basically, signing up, whether it's an OBGYN group or it's a pediatrics group, to put brochures in their waiting areas and answer questions on our test. We're batting 1,000. I don't think there's never been a doctor that says what you're doing is wrong. Their issue is more, it falls outside of their clinical workflows. So they're very much, child has symptoms. Now I know how to diagnose and treat those symptoms. Introducing a proactive genetic test doesn't really fit within their clinical workflows. So we've had a lot of success with OB offices. They see our product very similar to cord blood banking. It's an investment you make, because this information can be valuable. In our case, it can be valuable today and it can be valuable in the future and save a lot of time and money. And so that's what we've gravitated to. Now we've also launched more of a direct to consumer, we'll say, marketing campaign, because we realize that that's where parents are. That's where they're spending time. That's where they're consuming information. So we want to be there and having the conversation with them.
Great. And I want to kind of split this next question and maybe have each of you answer it. Because I think you'll all have very different answers based on the contributions that you're making at the company. But what is your dream for Foregenomics? What you hope comes from all of this hard work that you're all doing? So maybe we'll start with, I'm going to pick on Jason.
Okay. I think, maybe like an early stage dream scenario would be awareness, for parents to understand that this solution is there for them, and, that it's a solution that's going to bring you together with your doctor, create a strong basis for a really effective conversation, and not have you be a parent coming in with a Wikipedia page or something like that. So, making that connection between parents and physicians through this solution, and just raising awareness that, that it's out there. And then a longer term, dream scenario would be that, health insurance payers look at this and understand the power that it has, and it becomes more of a standard thing where parents are just indoctrinated into the fact that we always want to know everything that we can. There's no throwaway information. So I think it'd be in stages for me. What would be, the ultimate goal.
Yeah, I want to jump back to that first thing that you said, because Jess, I know that part of your story is you were convincing people of, this information. You had to be like your own Dr. Google in a certain sense. So the fact that, there's this validated test that a parent can say, hey, this is, real information, that's a game changer, right? Because
Yes. That's my dream for this, that every parent can access and acquire important health information about their child from the start, not when you have a problem, from the start. So whatever information we can give early on, regardless of what the genetics reveal, it's giving parents that gift of knowledge and peace going forward. And that's just, you can't replicate that. And you want to get up on a box and shout it to everyone, get your child genetic testing.
Yeah.
And if you're going to do it, this is the best screening test I've come across, because they do offer that package and the genetic counseling, and you're not just left there to flounder if something does come back. And to have the reassurance in your investment, your one cheek swab that you do, your child's going to be retested every year for new things that come out. So it's the peace of mind knowing you're being as proactive as you can in your child's health. And that's just the dream, is that everybody has access to this, everybody knows about it, and everybody starts doing that as you're having a baby. Okay, we're going to go get our Foregenomics and get that done after the baby's born. That's my dream for this company, and I really hope it happens. Until then, I'll just be shouting it to everybody. So.
I mean, because people have to go back and listen to your episode and, read some of the things that you've written in the past, because you were like chasing people down at conferences to convince them that you had the answers. So, I understand that answer completely. And Matt, what is your journey?
I don't have much different to say than what Jason and Jessica said. I would add, the amount of knowledge that we have about genetics and genomics is ever expanding, and I think there's some companies that have given it kind of a bad name, and it's not because they're doing anything wrong. It's just they were probably a little early, and what they could report on was, it wasn't as exciting or as useful as someone might have expected. But I really see a future where someone has their DNA sequence and it's used, maybe not every time you go to your doctor, but every time they're prescribing medication, every time that you present symptoms, they're going back, they're looking at, what do your genetics say? And then layering top of the predisposition tests that we've launched, layering out on top of it some monitoring tests. So now maybe you're predisposed to the disease. How is that disease progressing? Are we expecting symptoms? Are you closer to symptoms today than you were yesterday? The technology is almost there for that. It's definitely in the research, but that's where I think that this goes, is to really bring genomics into the clinic in more of an actionable way than it has been.
Yeah, because I think that's what it's not meant. You guys are certainly not trying to put stress into people's lives. You're meaning to empower them to have the information, to use that information in the right way. And like you said, a predisposition isn't a guarantee. So I think that's, such an important thing to keep in mind. Anything else that you want to share with the community, or any stories or anything before we start to wrap up?
I wanted to share something, your question to Matt about whether or not he had intention of, I forget exactly how the question was phrased, but when I learned about the company, learned about the commitment that it's going to make to families, FOR is built to be there. To do this test and sequence 100% of a child's genome and look at what science knows today, there's not a need to do 100% to just look at what science knows today. You could just look at where science knows. But the commitment to every year be ready to provide families with every single thing that's discovered, but from the medical and science community, Jessica could have perhaps not found her diagnosis. She may have been 1 year away. And every parent kind of knows all of these folks that have committed their lives to doing that genetic research. They're all with me on this, and this is going to provide me updates. And we stop at 18 because we're choosing, child onset conditions, but there's an adult extension of this as well. And so the way FOR has built the service that it's going to provide to families is a long-standing thing. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and I think of there's a rare family in our community that the condition that their daughter has was only discovered in 2017. And you think, as a world, like how far we have come with certain things, but the fact that there's this condition that is only 7 years old, and they actually think, I think there's only 700 confirmed cases in the world. And they actually think that that's just because the testing is completely out of reach for a lot of people. The amount of testing that you need to go through to get to the diagnosis. So, think about people who just, they don't know what is going on with their child, right? But they have no way to get to that information in an accessible way. So that's why we have just loved what you guys are doing. The minute Jess said your name, we were like, well, we need to hear more. So I really appreciate you sharing all the behind the scenes with us today. And Thank you for being here, taking the time. Jess, thank you for introducing us to this wonderful company. And we do have a code, right? So we have ELM 410 exclamation point. Well, it'll be in the show notes. It's ELM FORE 10 exclamation point, and that will give anybody listening 10% off of the testing. And we'll have the website and all the things linked in our show notes and all of our promotion of this episode. So feel free to reach out to us with any questions and we'll get you guys connected to the team. So thank you guys for being here. Thank you to all of you who listened. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with a friend or on social. It helps us to spread the message of this extra lucky life. Thank you all.